I grew up by the water. Originally from Northeast Ohio, along the shore of Lake Erie. And yes, I know I pronounce it differently, but that's how we say it up there. We used to go fishing. There was a little stone jetty not far from our house. To this day, I do not know if I caught any fish. My brothers tell me they did, but they are kind of fuzzy on whether I caught any or not. Years later, my parents had moved us to the Gulf Coast of Florida, and there we went occasionally down to the intercoastal waterway and put our hooks in the water. When I was in high school, we went to the causeways that cross Tampa Bay. And there we would spend the wee hours of the night. I don't remember catching anything, but I remember we had a lot of fun. So this is a fish story. This is one of those accounts in the Gospels that tell us something about Jesus and about those who follow him and about us. So, no doubt most of us have seen that symbol. Do you know what it means? Someone said Christ. Okay? There are 5 letters there. Do you know what they are? Okay, I'm going to show off my 90-plus hour master's degree and tell you what those 5 letters are. This is an acronym. So the first letter is iota. In Greek and Latin, there is no J, as we know it. So, iota. And you might want to write this down in your bulletin, because there will be a test later. The second letter. I heard someone say it. Chi. Okay. The third letter. Ooh, someone gives a gold star. Theta.
Somebody coming out the tracks way too much.
Yeah. A science major.
Science major. Sorry.
The fourth letter. This is a little tricky one because there are 2 different ways to pronounce it. It's either upsilon or upsilon.
I thought it was Yankee.
No. Yankee. The fifth letter. Sigma. All right. Now, Christians have been using this for nearly 2,000 years. The ancient world had used the fish symbol for thousands of years before that. But by the time of Jesus walking the shores of Galilee, the fish became known for us. But this is a fish story. So what do those 5 letters have to do with us? Have to do with Jesus? Have to do with the church or the faith? Well, iota. What do you think iota means? Or stands for? Jesus Remember, there are no J's in Greek or Latin. So the I is Jesus, or Jesus, the name that we claim, the person that we follow. What about the Chi? Christ. This isn't hard. You guys know this.
Looks like a cross.
It looks like a cross. Okay. So, Jesus, Christ. Jesus, the anointed one. That's what the I, or iota chi, means. Jesus the Christ. Jesus the anointed one. So we follow someone who lived, an actual living, breathing human being who walked and talked and did the stuff we do. And yet, when he stood on the shore of the Sea of Galilee that day, people came to hear him because he possessed in his personality, the way he carried himself, he wasn't simply another itinerant rabbi. He wasn't the only one who went from village to village talking about God. But people sought him out because the way that he talked about God, he sounded like he knew what he was talking about. And that's the message for us. We can't follow someone that we don't recognize. In order to follow Christ, you first have to say he existed. Don't just follow an idea or a concept or a movement. Follow the one who came to show us the way. But then you have this Christ idea. Paul read from Isaiah, and it talked about the death of King Uzziah. That was ballpark in the 750s, 740s BC. A long time ago. They had been waiting for someone to come that would explain to them what it was that God intended or God envisioned for their life and their nation. Do you think the people gathered on the seashore that day, do you think they understood that they were in the presence of the Christ? Because if we can't accept the idea that Jesus existed, then accepting someone coming in the name of God as God's anointed is irrelevant. So we first begin with this idea that Jesus is among us. And then that God can call people from their everyday life into the service of the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. But who anoints? Who chooses? Who summons? We sang about it. Paul read about it. Israel had been waiting for 7.5 centuries. They had been waiting for God. But you don't wait for an idea. You don't anticipate a concept. Because if God doesn't exist, then it doesn't matter who's anointed. If God doesn't exist, then it doesn't matter who is proclaiming or sharing a message. Jesus, the Christ, God. Now we get good. Now we get to Uppsala. Anyone want to take a guess of what Uppsala represents? Reg, I know you know. Uppsala is the first letter of Jesus. Jesus, Son. Jesus, the Christ, God's Son. Think about what you are saying when you say that. That God is the Creator. And that God created you in the image of the Holy. The title, Son of God, Son of Man, had been used before Israel's story. David was called the Son of God. So what does it mean when we say Jesus is the Son of God? For Jesus' early followers, it elevated this man who stood on the lakeshore. It elevated suddenly to the role of divine. Because you see, we're not following simply an ancient rabbi. We're not following someone who simply had good things to say about God. We're following God's Son. Now, as impressive as that is, you ain't seen nothing yet. Because Jesus said, I no longer call you servants, but friends and fellow heirs of the kingdom. That each of you are sons and daughters of God. That's incredible. I mean, I'm looking at Bob Edgar, and I'm thinking, there's the Son of God. Kind of makes you want to treat him with a little more respect, don't it? You would think that. But to call us sons and daughters of God, it elevates us back to the status that we had at creation. Because when Jesus was described as being the Son of God, what that was saying was, look, here's someone just like you, created in the image of God, who belongs with God, who came from God, will return to God, is of God. So when we look at each other and see maybe an old woman, maybe a young child, maybe fill in the blank. We're seeing not simply someone who is, but someone who is as God created them. Jesus, Messiah, Son of God. Sigma. Sigma is where we often lose people. Because, well, yesterday, the state of Alabama executed someone. This individual, and I don't know anything about his case, was a Muslim. The state of Alabama, in its wisdom, said that he could not have an imam, a minister, with him. They said he can have a Christian minister, but he can't have one of his own. A cousin of mine who lives in Rome, Georgia, took me to task because I said that, to me, that was a clear violation of his civil rights. And she said, but wouldn't it have been a greater benefit to offer him salvation? Salvation is something that we do not offer. That man, created in the image of God, as were his victims, as were the executioner, as were the witnesses. There was no call from the governor. There was no offer of salvation. When Jesus came, he did not tell people, unless you do what I tell you to do, God will not love you. Salvation is such a term that it is weighted with centuries of expectations and nuances. What does it mean to be saved? Saved from what? Saved for what? Saved by whom? What does it mean, salvation? What does it mean to embrace this term, this concept, this state of being? Because ultimately, that's what we're doing here. We're talking about slices and snippets and, dancing around the edge. But at some point, we have to come face to face with salvation. Is it something that you want? Is it something you expect? Is it something that can be lost or gained or regained or shared? For that man in Huntsville at the state prison, I really don't think having a